Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Last week we noted that it seemed a little strange, a little odd, that former CIA Director John Brennan still has a high-level security clearance. He doesn't work for the government anymore. He's a cable news yapper who spends a lot of his life yelling at people on Twitter. Brennan is also a political extremist who, if you listen carefully, seems unbalanced. If John Brennan gets a security clearance, then why not the homeless guy talking to himself on the bus? That seemed like a fair question. Apparently, the White House agreed with that. Yesterday, the administration announced it is seeking to revoke security clearances for John Brennan, Jim Clapper, and other former officials who no longer work for the government. Because, honestly, why would they have security clearances? In a normal year, that would not be a very big story, but things are not normal right now. So here's how the geniuses on cable news reacted. Watch.
This is an abuse of executive power. This is Erdogan's Turkey.
That is exactly what you see in authoritarian regimes.
It's childish. It's petty.
This is so extraordinary. The last thing you want in intelligence is partisanship.
That he would turn against them in a way that obviously disrespects civil liberties, disrespects free press, is an autocratic kind of move. It's the kind of thing you'd see in a banana republic.
Autocratic. First they came for John Brennan's security clearance, and I said nothing. Barf. Next time you hear some blowhard on television warning about creeping authoritarianism, ask yourself, am I for unfettered free speech? Of course you are. You're an American. That is your birthright and the foundation of all other liberties. Then ask yourself a second question. How about the guy on television lecturing us about authoritarianism? Is he for unfettered free speech? No chance. He considers your opinions hate speech, which is a made-up category designed to gut the First Amendment and shut you up. He'd happily support big tech firms and college administrators and your company's HR department as they punish you for saying what you think is true. Creeping authoritarianism? It's already here, and that guy is the face of it. Lou Dobbs, by contrast, hosts Lou Dobbs Tonight on Fox Business, and he joins us tonight. Lou, what do you make of this controversy? I can't remember a weirder one. I was not aware that John Brennan had a moral right to a security clearance in perpetuity. Were you?
His ascendancy to the moral high ground caught me by surprise, too. This is the man who CIA spied on the Senate Intelligence Committee, who lied about spying on the Senate Intelligence Committee. It is extraordinary that this man has challenged, insulted, and degraded the presidency throughout the past year, and now would object to having his security clearance lifted. Tucker, I can't imagine why any one of those people retained a security clearance. They are of absolutely no use to any of them unless they're monetizing it, as Senator Rand Paul has said. And I thought, frankly, your discussion with Rand Paul hit exactly the right note in questioning the existence of security clearance for former officials, period, for any reason.
Well, I mean, he's a cable news yapper. He's a consultant to cable news, and so is Jim Clapper. And they have the highest level security clearances. And it raises the question then, like, why don't I have one? Or why don't you have one? I mean, what could possibly be the justification for that?
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm holding out for subpoena power. I would much prefer subpoena power. You get the clearance, we'll have lunch and go from there. I think this is just an absurdity that it exists at all. Think about Clapper and the quality of people that were in the Obama intelligence, leading the intelligence community under President Obama. Clapper, I will leave Michael Rogers, the head of the NSA, out of this. He is a sterling quality individual. But Clapper and Brennan and Comey, are you kidding me? Why in the world would they have security clearances?
And then you see these former liberals in good standing defending this, and it makes you realize that whatever Trump is for, they're against, and vice versa. So it's very easy to bait them. All of a sudden, they're for MS-13, and they're for, acting in porn movies as a noble profession, and they're for demented former CIA directors having security clearances. I mean, how easy would it be to get them to take totally insane positions just by telling them that Trump is against it?
Well, I don't think it would be difficult, as you point out, at all. Think about the positions that Clapper has taken. the lies that he has told. Comey, who's misrepresented at the very least so much. He talked about President Trump as a man who is nefarious, but this is the man he was perfectly willing to serve as his FBI director. And the list goes on. The madness and the intrigue here is overwhelming, I suspect, to most Americans. Because first, they didn't know that these people had security clearances still. They didn't understand why they got them in the first place and ascended to the top of their agencies. And the fact is, whether it's the FBI, the CIA, the DNI, what were their great accomplishments and achievements in leading the intelligence community? Was it to
exactly?
It's the history of the intelligence community over the past 20 years is a sad and sorry tale.
If I worked in the White House, I would convene a month-long symposium against human trafficking just to watch Morning Joe convene a panel in favor of it. I think it would be hilarious.
I will endorse that idea. I think that's a lovely idea.
Amen. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Tucker.
Buck
Thanks so much.
Sexton is a former CIA analyst. He worked with the NYPD's Intel Division. He joins us tonight. So, you've worked in this world, Buck. You have a better sense of this. Does this apply across all government agencies? If I'm a rifleman in the Marine Corps, do I get to keep my rifle at the end? Or if I work in artillery, do I get to keep my howitzer when I leave? Is this kind of the way it works?
There's specific law with regard to clearances, and there's also customs, Tucker. And when you're talking about former agency heads, they tend to keep them in a way that run-of-the-mill employees like me don't. And they also have, as a courtesy, they'd say, the ability to go back in and still have real-time access to classified information if, in fact, they were called in for that. That's the justification for this. But I feel like this whole debate just highlights a much bigger problem, a much more nefarious issue, and that is we have all these people lecturing us about institutions being undermined, and look what's happened to us, and the hacking of our democracy, and this can't be allowed to happen. We have the former intel chiefs of the biggest agencies of the United States government, the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus on the planet, who are actively trying to undermine now the sitting president of the United States. And they weren't the intel chief 10 or 20 years ago. They were the most recent one. What that means is that every time you've got Clapper or Brennan or others who are going on air talking about, for example, the Russia collusion case, there is at least some perception. And by the way, I think some of them have tried to enhance this with what they've said. They've danced around this, that they're drawing upon their classified knowledge to make some of these assumptions, right? They have extra gravitas. They should be paid attention to more because they were the most recent NSA or CIA director. That is insidious. I mean, this is deeply destructive to the faith that any future president could have in the previous administration's appointees at that level. And that's something I think does not get talked about enough at all here.
No, I think it's a very wise point. And remind us again the point of having all these various alphabet agencies, all the intel apparatus exists only to serve the executive and to help him or her make wise foreign policy decisions, correct? Is there some other reason to have a CIA?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of agencies, 17 now, I think, technically in the intel community, though someone's probably going to correct me on that one, because it's actually grown since I was in it, so that will tell you something. It wasn't that long ago. But they exist. They exist to give for national security purposes. They would tell you what all the different specific missions are. But yes, they're executive branch agencies, and that then brings us to they should be serving the executive branch. And the same way that liberals, Tucker, don't really accept that President Trump is the president, and therefore could fire Comey for no reason or any reason. If he wants to revoke clearances under his Article 2 authority, he can do that. So all of this freak out you're seeing from people is a form of Trump derangement syndrome on display for an issue that, by the way, most of these journalists have no idea what they're talking about. They've never held a clearance. They don't know what goes into this, and they don't know why anyone has one anyway.
Also, they're dumb. I mean, if Trump's an authoritarian, he's a pretty inefficient one. I mean, if Brennan and Clapper still have clearances a year and a half in, it's not much of a police state, I would say. Buck Sexton, great to see you.
Good to see you, Tucker. Thanks.
Well, they're inflamed over on the left, and tempers do not appear to be cooling. Over this weekend, the Denver Post published a letter to the editor suggesting that Trump and other members of administration literally deserve to be executed for treason. Well, as we do so very often, things get completely nuts. We bring in some perspective. Fox's senior political analyst, Brit Hume, has seen everything, and therefore he can put this in the appropriate context and calm us down. Brit, great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. Nice to see you.
What do you make of this?
Well, I went and read the letter, and it basically references Trump as some kind of traitor and notes that the Rosenbergs, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, were found guilty of that and says the letter, they were executed. I didn't quite see this as a suggestion that Trump be executed, but it was, it was close to the line, and you might have thought the editors at the Denver Post would have been more careful about publishing it. But if we weren't here talking about it tonight, I don't think the world would longer than a few minutes even note that it ever happened. So I think it's probably much ado about not much.
But it raises the larger question, which is, and correctly, that treason is a death penalty offense, and the Rosenbergs were indeed executed for it at Sing Sing. And if you accuse someone of that in public, particularly if you're an elected official, you're making a pretty stout charge.
You are. Well, this is the thing about this is, and it came up in your previous segment when you're talking about John Brennan, who openly accused the president of treason. We now inhabit an age of exaggeration. Everybody goes to battle stations and to DEFCON 1 over everything. So it is not enough to say that Trump unwisely sided with Putin for a period of time against the intelligence. No, it's treason, and he's a traitor. And on the other side, of course, everybody is said to be corrupt, and there's no reasoned discussion going on right now. Everybody on all sides goes completely berserk, hair on fire over everything. And on it goes. Right now, there is a battle royal raging in Washington over the interpretation of the materials, the FISA application materials released at the end of the last week, as to their interpretation. Some journalists are writing, after reviewing them, that they support the conclusions reached by Devin Nunes and the House Intelligence Committee. Others are saying that that's all a lie, that it doesn't support that at all. I've never seen such diametrically opposed interpretations, and it's all at the highest possible decibel level, like nothing I've ever seen before.
So what would happen if there was an actual crisis, if there was an attack by a foreign power, physical attack, an actual attack, not a metaphorical one, and we found ourselves at war? How would a country this divided prosecute a war?
Well, it would be entirely up to the government itself. Because I'm sure that the president's critics would interpret anything as he did as a kind of wag the dog scenario, and then believe that it was false, and the intelligence had reported it was false, and so on. And nobody trusts anybody, and that extends to the Congress. It extends to the media. The competition among media outlets is more intense than I've ever seen it, and all media outlets criticize all other media outlets. Professional courtesy about that is all but gone, and we inhabit an age where everybody is at the ramparts over everything all day, every day.
I've noticed that. Brit Hume, remaining calm despite all of it. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Tucker.
President Trump on the road in Missouri today, pushing his agenda amid new fallout over threatening to pull security clearances from former Obama administration officials.
We don't apologize for America anymore. We stand up for America. We stand up for the patriots who defend America. The way we keep America great is to make at least reasonable, I'm not saying at least reasonable, at least fair trade deals, not stupid trade deals like we've put up with for 25 years. Democrats who are going so far left that nobody can believe it. They want open borders and crime's okay. We want strong borders and we want no crime. Other than that, we're very similar.
President Trump not addressing the controversy over security clearances, while Democrats and the media are slamming him over it.
The White House today releasing an enemies list, a list of former national security officials.
That is not what you see in a democracy. That is exactly what you see in authoritarian regimes.
This is an abuse of executive power. This is Erdogan's Turkey.
This is the sort of attack on free speech, the press, and the rights of individuals to speak out in our country that really doesn't serve the president well.
Is an autocratic kind of move. It's the kind of thing you'd see in a banana republic.
I have been in the meetings for over 20 years. This is so extraordinary. The last thing you want in intelligence is partisanship.
As you notice, Greg, the president did not even mention it today, so it's like it was here today, gone tomorrow, and it's like it's not going to happen, but he got everybody riled up.
in Trump land, there's no what we're seeing is backlash or fallout. There's no such thing as backlash or fallout anymore because it's indistinguishable from how the press acts every day. So when they go on there and they pull out their hair, we're all like, so what? This is how you react when he sneezes. So this doesn't mean anything to us. And then you have the Dems saying stuff like, well, the revoking of the security clearances or a deflection. That's the worst deflection ever then, because he's responding. He's actually responding to the collusion accusations by saying you're colluding too, and I'm taking away your clearances. That's not a deflection. A deflection is actually trying to change the subject. What Trump does is he intensifies the subject. If you're saying something, he goes, oh yeah, I'm saying this. And then pretty soon he turns it into another story.
He runs to the light.
He's like a moth to the flame, which is a terrible analogy.
But in some ways, Kennedy, I wonder about him having lived in the New York media market for so long, right? And it's rough and tumble and it's crazy and there's all these things, even though it is sort of diminishing by the day. But in New York, he's dealt with this kind of thing a long time, and we know that in his business career, he would figure out how to utilize the media, change the subject, get the deal done. And I do think the security clearance thing was something he thought of, but is probably not going to do.
I don't think, and I think Paul Ryan was right, and that he's essentially just trolling people, which is fine, and that's not illegal, and that's not treasonous. But in the hypercritical response of some Democrats, they talk about making sure that the security apparatus and intelligence agencies and officials are not partisan. But you have James Clapper and John Brennan and James Comey who are hyper-partisan. They're the ones James Comey stood before Congress, as you well remember, Congressman Chaffetz, stood before Congress and basically talked about how objective and politically agnostic he was. And he's sitting here tweeting, telling people to go vote for Democrats, which is fine. You can have free speech. You can be completely against the president. You can have any political opinion you want. But we know what the surveillance state was capable of. We know the power that these people have and the backdoor searches they were able to do on millions of Americans. And Lord only knows where that information has gone. And it seems like in some cases they are, in fact, using it to their economic monetary advantage.
I'm not sure. Okay, well, Juan, I'll let you respond to that.
That's wacky. I mean, there's no evidence that they've used it to any economic advantage. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, oh, they've monetized it. And it was like, well, so what did they do? Did they, go get a security briefing from somebody and then sell the information to the Russians? I don't think so. I don't even think that she really meant that. What she's suggesting is, oh, maybe because they have a job working at one of the networks or they gave a speech or they wrote a book. But again, nobody has come forward and said that's the case. I mean, this is so silly. And by the way, this is the hole in your argument. The Wall Street Journal's editorial page this morning said, dumb idea. I don't think there are any far left bunch of Democrat wackos on the Wall Street Journal editorial board.
But that's actually, Jason, why I said that I think that he threw it out there as chum in the water. Everybody rose to it, but it probably is not going to go anywhere.
Well, and Senator Rand Paul, I think, was one of the very first people to bring this up. And it does beg the question, these people are former employees. Why do they need to continue to get that? If they want an original classification authority, which is the legal term in which the president and certain other people can deem somebody or give them a security clearance, then do that. If Secretary Pompeo wants to go back and talk to maybe Colin Powell because they're dealing with Saudi Arabia and they want the historical knowledge, then just go and give him a security clearance.
Right.
But they don't need a blanket one so they can continue to be fed information, which then they go on television and go to companies and say, hey, I still get this.
But that information and that knowledge is implicit. I mean, but that's why you hire someone like John Brennan to be a correspondent at MSNBC. I don't have a problem with someone like that. I don't have a problem with James Comey going out and writing a book and making money. But the idea that you have to trust me because I have the secret information and I'm going to keep you safe because I know better than everybody else, I'm sorry, but I'm resentful of that attitude.
Well,
and it seems like they're gathering together to create a cabal.
Kennedy, you're just wrong. It's just the wrong
I'm not
premise.
wrong. There's nothing wrong about what I just said.
Well, let me explain to you. That, in fact, none of these people, two of them don't even have security clearance on the list, right? McCabe and Comey don't even have it.
According to whom? Because they were read out, that doesn't mean they don't have security.
Hang on.
Yeah,
and none of them says that they are regularly going back to get security briefings. They simply have the clearance. 4 million Americans have security clearance. And this is unprecedented for anybody to go back now and try to take the whole premise, by the way, in response to you. Let me finish. In response to you, the whole premise is these folks then would have knowledge that when somebody then comes to them and says, hey, can you help me? Did you go through a situation with Iran? Did you go through a situation in Iraq? Here's what I'm thinking. What do you think, sir? You've been through this. That's all this is about.
But Greg is right. The hyper reaction to this was way over the top. It's not a suppression of any of their First Amendment rights. It doesn't do anything like that.
Well, also because it hasn't happened. And Greg, I think that when I was read out, like you sign a thing that says I no longer have a security clearance, and you walk away and you're walled off, and you don't have access to your computer. Like there's a high side and a low side, and it's actually quite stark. It doesn't mean that you don't have maybe people you can call in the agency who might tell you something, but that's leaks. And if there was something illegal that happened, maybe we need another Inspector General report. But I do want to talk about the president's ability to change the subject, intensify the subject. Basically, he's spinning a lot of plates all at once while managing the policy. And today he introduced a few other things at the VA speech. And I do think it is hard for people to keep up.
I think, and I don't know if you can blame him for that.
No, it's fine.
I mean, the fact is, he's not a normal politician. A politician wakes up in the morning, they have their policy breakfast, then they talk to somebody, then they have their policy lunch, then they're thinking about writing something. By the time it's 3 o'clock for Trump, he's already done 18 things. And I do say, I always go back to my original theory that it's because he has so much energy because he doesn't drink. It's like if you don't drink, you just, you're up at 5 in the morning, you can do anything. And it really is kind of amazing. He's decided to run a race, and he's daring everybody to keep up with him.
Yeah.
You may not like the direction of where he's running, but he's saying, if you want to keep up with me, keep up with me.
So how do they figure out how to respond when it's warranted?
Oh, I know.
Because he thrives in the chaos.
Here's the answer.
Okay.
Give him a drink.
Oh, terrible.
I think
that works with me, though, Juan.
I'm going to try it with you.
Well, just wait till my one more thing, because you're going to be a very happy man. I think what he does is he gauges the reaction, and I think that's why Paul Ryan said, maybe we do need to look at whether or not someone has continued clearance after they leave government work. But at the same time, he said he's just trolling people. And so he essentially goes and sees what the hysterical reaction is from the left. And if it is so hysterical that their heads explode and there's brain bits on the walls, that for the president, it's a minor victory, because we're not talking about Helsinki.
Kennedy, what
we're
happens
not
when the
talking
guy,
about Russia.
What happens when he calls all of us enemy of the American people? When he tries to pull NBC's license?
Only fake news.
When he says, Washington Post is Amazon's.
That's a what if as opposed
to
a what is.
He says these things about NBC, Washington Post. He goes after everybody. Enemy of the American people. That's his words.
No, he's talking about people he believes are misleading America. He's not saying everybody. And by the way, where did he learn this? He learned this from us. This is a guy who's learned how to fight from cable news. This is a relatively new practice in his party. He wasn't like this before. He's like this now. So I think we're hypocrites if we go after him for doing exactly what we do. By the way, we have great news. North Korea, right? Is that great news, potentially? Dismantling? Yeah, I know it should be met with skepticism. But I find it troubling to see people rooting against this, because if there is peace, it might make him look good.
They themselves are saying they're skeptical.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, you should be. But the fact is, if there's a possibility of lasting peace, how can you be rooting against it?
Did somebody root against it?
I think everybody who trashes, I think everybody who can't stand Trump doesn't want this to work.
Everybody that
I don't think that's mind reading. I think it's pretty obvious.
It's inconceivable, though. It really is. I mean, if we're at a point, if North Korea, according to President Obama, if that was our greatest global foe, and if we are able to neutralize that situation, how could you do anything but cheer for that as a human being, let alone an American?
I think that the people you're talking about did cheer for it at the summit itself, and was like, if it
they had no choice.
And then when they didn't come to the meeting and they did their usual thing, they're like, well, we told you so. But all along, the administration has said, we were very clear-eyed about this. We know that there were going to be stops and starts.
But it's still compared to 6 months ago, 8 months ago. You cannot deny we have made progress.
Oh, yeah. You check with President Trump on this, because I think he's been indicating he's not happy at the lack of progress
he's impatient about everything.
Good for him.
Nikki Haley recently spoke to some high school students. I wonder if she said it's easier than ever to make snarky remarks or take joy in opponents' mistakes or misfortunes.
It's easier than ever to make snarky remarks or take joy in opponents' mistakes or misfortunes. Raise your hand if you've ever posted anything online to quote-unquote own the libs. I know it's fun and that it can feel good, but step back and think about what you're accomplishing when you do this. Are you persuading anyone? Who are you persuading?
Yeah, she's right. Shutting down someone persuades no one. Still, does that matter? Mocking Dana's dog just feels good. How can I stop? But if you go online right now, you're going to find two ugly sides to everything. Yet if you decide to disarm, will the other side actually follow? Not if they read the New York Times, where an op-ed today says, if you want to beat Trump, centrism is not the answer. Urging Times readers to veer left is like asking Trump to use bigger capital letters. Fact is, social media is getting way worse. On Twitter, blue-check celebrities just attacked one of their own, actor Mark Duplass, for complimenting Ben Shapiro. Right now, the left seeks scalps by mobbing people online for speech and ideas. It's digital warfare unleashed. And so, now you see the right fighting back. But there's a debate among that side. Do you take the high ground when you're attacked, or do you return fire? It's mutually assured destruction. You smear me, I smear you, so maybe let's stop smearing each other. But at some point, we need to fire Twitter from our lives. It's now a tool of vengeance, employed by mobs for cheap thrills. So, Jack, you're the CEO, and your company is now nothing more than an online supermarket for people selling torches and pitchforks. It's disgusting. Why not give it a rest for a day? Shut it down. Look for a solution. As loud as Twitter can be, silence can be louder and more eloquent. Thoughtful, Dana?
Well, it was very thoughtful. I love Nikki Haley's speech, but I just had this visual of President Trump calling Jack Dorsey into the cabinet room of the White House and reaching across the desk and saying, "You're fired."
But you know what? It's like
remarkable.
There are solutions to this. I think it's easy for Nikki Haley to tell these kids not to do it because she's not there every day. But there is a way to deal with this. I think that they should let everybody have a chance to reset Twitter. Just get rid of everything. Kennedy.
And that's some of the advice you're given, especially, if you've got tweets from 2008, 2009 that you've completely forgotten about, like the Guardians of the Galaxy director who wrote some stupid stuff and even went on Twitter a few years later saying, hey, sorry about that stupid stuff. I really shouldn't have written that. I was going through a phase.
Yes.
And then it was unearthed and he was fired. And the question is, how many scalps will it take for either side to be happy?
Yeah.
Because they're both doing it, and it is pretty aggressive, and there is something to be said for relying on a rational argument, because we've gotten to a point of such intense emotionalism that people no longer remember how to make an argument. All they know how to do is punch back, and you have joggers defecating in public.
Oh, yes. I only did that once, Kennedy. Why bring it up on TV? What do you think, Jason? Is this unstoppable? Is the genie out of the barn?
Well, in Europe, they're actually dealing with the right to be forgotten.
I love that.
Can you go to a place and say, you know what, I get to erase that part?
Yeah.
And what I think we as a society, on a serious note, really have to think about is how do we deal with minors? Because you got 12 and 13-year-olds signing user agreements to go ahead and be out there and post all these photos. How is it that somebody hasn't sued the living daylights out of all these social media companies and won for accepting a 12-year-old's, use of the rights and posting up all those photos? And I think when you're making a decision and you're underage, you can really have to live with that the rest of your life. Is that going to affect you in your job and everything else? There's some big questions society has to answer. And
I
that's
think,
one
by
of
the
them.
way, I have a personal experience here to share, but I think you're onto something. Where a young man came to me for a job recommendation. I recommended him for a job. He goes to the person that I recommended him to. Then the person calls me several days later and says, have you ever seen this guy's Twitter and social media account? Did
you say I don't even know how?
Yeah, really. Because it's like a sewer. The guy, and we had this week one of the Milwaukee Brewers pitchers.
Yes.
He got in trouble because he was
17 or
when
so,
he was a kid, 17 in Maryland. He's making all these horrible racial comments. Well, guess what? Somebody digs it up now. He's an all-star. and boom, it's a big problem.
Everybody's digging up stuff on everybody else. Shouldn't we just declare amnesty?
But this is different than I think the argument that you guys were making about the political back and forth. I mean, you're smearing.
I'm for both. I'm more. The political stuff doesn't bother me as much as the scalping. Like, well, I want to get Juan fired by finding something he said.
Yeah, but the thing is that bullying like that, to Nikki Haley's point, is not persuasive. In other words, you can say, hey, you know what? I'm smarter than Juan. I had a better comeback than Juan. But does it really persuade anybody that, oh, yeah, I'm going to change the way I think? You know, Greg made such an interesting argument. I was thinking about this, but now I'm thinking about that. No, it just like makes people, as Nikki Haley said, dig in their heels and become angry.
I think that is embodied in the partisanship of the country today, or the polarization, because the numbers are actually, you know how you were doing this?
Yeah.
I think they're remarkably steady. I think that everyone has basically gone to their side.
Yeah.
And there's only about 9% of independent voters left.
So when you go like this, can I come over? Yeah. Give me a back rub? Or when you smear, I get the Smucker's jelly.
But are they the ones in charge? Are the independents the ones who decide? Because the ones who are really not committed to either side, because both sides are so dug in.
I don't know.
And if Republicans lose, are they going to be as upset as Democrats?
I remember when Ann Coulter a few years ago, maybe it was in the 2012 presidential election, she said, "Who cares about the independents? Just try to turn your base out." And I, you know, of course, the RNC was like, "Oh my gosh, if we do that, we won't win." They did it in 2012, but they did in 2016, but with two very different candidates. So I don't know.
I don't know either.